Welcome to Traverse, a Huckberry podcast where we explore the stories of people who have committed themselves to live an unconventional life. I'm Chris Burkard, an adventure photographer, and I'll be joined by my friend and ecologist Charles Post. Each episode will bring on a guest and dig into what motivates them, how and why they've pursued a life of adventure, uncover actionable tips and inspiration, and a whole lot more. Because there's always a new adventure around the corner, and the world is still full of corners. Welcome to Traverse. Today's episode features Jocko Willink, author, beloved podcaster, and retired United States Navy officer who served in the Navy SEALs and former member of SEAL Team 3. Since leaving the SEALs in 2010, Jocko has written over 10 books, including Extreme Ownership and The Way of the Warrior Kid. He started the Jocko podcast, which discusses everything from war to business to everyday life. He founded the management consultant firm Echelon Front, along with a myriad of other companies. It's safe to say he is one of the most motivated and unique individuals on the planet, which makes him the perfect first guest for the Traverse podcast.
Chris.
My man.
Dude, those photos you got of the volcanic eruption in Iceland are unreal. Did you throw anything into... I was so curious. Did you throw anything into the lava? Is that like best practices?
It's definitely kind of funny because it's a little like anti-leave no trace. I'm not going to lie. I tossed in some stuff. I watched some rocks just explode into flames. It was probably one of the most gratifying things in the world to simply just watch like things combust, right? It bring out the inner pyrotechnic in me. And, yeah, I mean, it's not something that I think everybody in the world should start throwing rocks into lava, but I mean, can you help yourself? Like, it's the coolest feeling in the world, you know?
And so you're in Iceland. You're spending your summer here and you're basically on a volcano tour. That was the calling.
For some reason, the universe has aligned to allow me to be in Iceland for the second volcanic eruption of the Geldingadalur Valley, right? So this is the same area where the first eruption happened, just another valley next to it, all connected. What's crazy about it is, unlike other eruptions, and this is just like the world according to Chris Burkard, I am no scientist. I didn't even go to high school, I didn't even go to college. I barely graduated high school. But for all intents and purposes, I am a moron. But as it was explained to me, most volcanoes have a chamber that fills up, and then that chamber gets high pressure, right? And it explodes, right? And so what happens is that chamber builds up and all the heavy stuff sits to the bottom. It's like a fizzy drink, right? So all this heavy stuff. This eruption is different because it has access to lava that's below the mantle of the earth, meaning 17 kilometers down, there is an endless supply of lava, theoretically. And that's where this volcano is accessing. So it's terrifying because it could last for a very long time, if you know what I mean. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about our guest, Jocko, who, you know, you and I both agreed, like, there's probably nothing more scary in the world than Jocko.
We asked him so many good questions, but the one that just I couldn't get out of my mind was, are you afraid of anything? No.
Yeah. I mean, and just you just know, like, when he says it, he's being honest.
I'm Charles Post.
And I'm Chris Burkard. Let's dive in. Jocko, where are you at right now? Where are we catching you?
You're catching me in San Diego, California.
Two close friends of mine, two brothers, the Higginbotham brothers, they paddled from Alaska to Mexico. Oddly enough, not sure if it was just because of a favor of a friend or what, but you ended up doing the voiceover for that film, and it basically changed the whole dynamic of the film, and it was a huge thing for them. And did you feel some kind of connection to them or that journey? Like, what made you say yes, I guess?
I'm trying to think of what the connection was. I don't have a lot of friends, and so whatever the friend of a friend connection was there, if one of my friends asked me to do something, then I'm going to do it. And yeah, I mean, it's cool. Those guys were doing something that was hardcore, and I like, hardcore stuff. It's funny though. I had to do it twice. You probably don't know that.
Oh God.
The first one that I did was a little bit too hard, a little bit too hardcore. And so they were like, and the thing is though, is I hadn't seen it. They just sent me the script. And so I read it like, the water was a mere 38 degrees. The time to paddle out was now. And I read it like that kind of mode. And then they sent me they said, hey,
little lighter.
Look at the film and, maybe they're not going to war. I was like, all right, cool, I got it. And then I chilled out a little bit and did it again.
Yeah.
So.
And the film was called By Hand for those who haven't seen it. It won some awards, did really good. But yeah, those guys, I mean,
dude, it won awards.
Hardcore.
That's awesome. I didn't know anything about that because I just did it and then I never really heard about it again.
Yeah, I just did the festival circuit, but it was, I mean, obviously, like, as terms of a documentary, like something that had never been done. I mean, their trip still blows my mind. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in the ocean, but the areas they were paddling just are so scary. I mean, it's heavy, man. So
very
heavy.
Cool.
I feel like you should follow up. You might have like an award with your name on it just sitting in a box somewhere. I mean,
best voiceover of all time. Yeah.
That's a thing. I think people get awards for voiceovers.
Or the award is like voiceover that's a little bit too intense for a documentary film.
Yeah, it was going to be PG, made it PG-13.
Yeah.
VO is a little intense.
It's R. They had to give a warning label before they showed it.
No way.
Did you pick up on surfing when you were doing your training, or was this just something you've always wanted to do? Did you do it in New England?
I started surfing in Maine as a kid, and I was very lucky. There was a really true waterman who was a lifeguard in Kennebunk, Maine, and his name is Mark Seeley. And when I was 10 years old, I lived in like an attic apartment in this building, and he came up and said, "Hey, I'm going to teach you how to surf." And so he gave me a surfboard. It was a Robert August Swallowtail, and he took me out surfing. And so then once I learned to surf, then it really narrowed down what I wanted to do, because I wanted to be, in the military. I wanted to be some kind of commando. And I realized that if I was in the SEAL teams, I could get stationed in either San Diego or Virginia Beach, which I was ready to go to either one of those places. And so, when I joined the military, I joined the SEAL team so that I could get stationed in a cool place and to be able to work in the water, because obviously I like working in the water, growing up surfing. So,
was surfing something you could do while you're on active duty? Is that even like an option?
Oh yeah, it's not just an option. I mean, you are stationed on the beach. I mean, you have your boards at work, and if the waves are good, you go.
And you're also accessing some of the sickest beach breaks and point breaks in California. I mean, DMJs and all that stuff down in lower San Diego, like, it's exceptional. And, normal people like myself, we would always try to rub shoulders with anybody we could to get in there, which is wild. So, I mean, you have access to killer spots. Speaking of surfing, you feel like you came into SEALs with kind of that advantage, being comfortable in the water. Obviously, it's a lot different training, but just that comfort level, being tossed around in the surf and being, having to kind of, because the ocean's so much about letting go. You're in the shore break zone. You're not like fighting through it. You're just having to relax. And did that like translate to, like, I don't know, I guess giving you some kind of leg up in some capacity?
Surfing is 100% a leg up going through SEAL training. It is probably one of the best backgrounds you can have, is to be a surfer, because you have that comfort level in the water. You're used to the cold, and that's probably, I think it might be the biggest leg up that you can have. Wrestlers can do really well, but wrestlers can also, if you're not comfortable in the water, you're never going to make it. So and one of the best ways to get comfortable in the water polo players as well, but they can do well. Swimmers can do well, but surfers, it's cold. You get that cold aspect as well as a surfer.
Yeah. What were you like as a kid? What was 15-year-old Jocko like? I mean, I'd love to imagine.
I'm very, very lucky that I went into the SEAL teams, because I was a very rebellious kid. I had a lot of energy and a lot of aggression, and it wasn't being placed in a healthy place when I was a kid. And so when I joined the military, it was like an incredible blessing, because now all of a sudden, all this energy and aggression that I had as a young man, I got told, okay, this is what you're going to do. This is what you do. This is what you do with all this energy. You work hard, you exercise, you train, you prepare, and that's where all my focus went. And so I got very lucky that I joined the military, because otherwise, it's like you got this bundle of energy that's getting ready to explode, and you need to release that somehow. And when I was growing up, I'd release it in the mosh pit, or I'd release it in fights, or whatever. We had hardcore bands when I was a kid, and we were just raging children. And luckily I joined the military and was able to place that extra energy and rage into a positive thing.
Jocko, what I was going to say is, how did you know the SEALs? Like, you joined the service. Did you just have this idea that the SEALs existed and you needed to be there, or was there some sort of a journey that kind of got you to that realization?
Like I said, I always wanted to be in the military. I always wanted to do some kind of special operations. When I was a little kid, I collected these little soldiers, these little toy soldiers. And my favorite of all those toy soldiers was the British Commandos. And I had these little British Commandos, and they had like little Zodiac boats, and they had kayaks, and they had, skull cap hats. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I figured out at some point that the American version of that was the SEAL teams. If you wanted to be in a little boat, you wanted to come across the beach and work in the ocean and go do commando stuff from the ocean, that was the SEAL teams. And when I figured that out, that's kind of how it ended up happening.
Was there a point where you thought about quitting at all? Was there any significant moment where you're like, oh, this is like the bottom, the very bottom of everything?
No, not at all. I never thought about quitting for 1 second. I never. It was, yeah. I was young, and that's what I wanted to do. And they would have had to kill me. I just didn't care about anything else, and I had fun, And look, I've talked to some of my buddies that said it sounded like I made it sound like it was easy, and it wasn't easy. And doing a 4-mile timed run on the beach, you got to make that time. And that was not easy for me. I had to run as hard as I could. Doing a 2-mile ocean swim, that's not easy for me. It was hard for me. I had to work really hard. I had to put out obstacle course, the regular physical training, like all that stuff was not easy for me, but it was fun. I hear some people say everyone thinks about quitting. I never thought about quitting, and I know a bunch of other guys that never thought about quitting. And so, yeah, I wasn't going to quit.
But so that mindset, like the not quitting mindset, where did that come from? That's something you just had, or?
I wanted to be a SEAL.
So how is the Navy SEAL Jocko different from the Jocko today?
No different.
No different.
Oh, no, there is a different. Now other people know that I'm doing what I'm doing, but I'm still doing the same stuff that I've been doing for 30 years. I still wake up, I still work out. That's what I've been doing. I was doing that when I was in the SEAL teams. I showed up to work early, like this is just me. And that's what's cool. The guys that I was in the teams with, they know exactly that. They know who I am. They know I've been like this forever. There's no facade I'm putting up. It's just me. And so nothing's really changed about me. I guess people might know who I am a little bit more. Obviously no one knew who I was when I was in the SEAL teams outside the guys in the SEAL teams. So that's it. I'm still the same dude.
You obviously, were you a good student prior to going into SEALs? Like, were you good at school at all? I mean, I personally can't understand how you've taken this upbringing and then SEALs, and then all of a sudden, like, this business experience and marketing experience that you've basically created all of these different avenues for success. Like, where did that come from? Where did that sense of business come from?
So no, I wasn't a good student in high school. I barely did any homework. I don't think I read any books. I I definitely didn't bring books home. Like I wouldn't bring books home from school. And it's a lot different now. My kids were doing 3, 4, 5 hours of homework every day. Yeah. I didn't do homework. And it's just a different time. I think there was less homework at the time anyways. Maybe that's just my bias, but no, it wasn't until I joined the military. And then, when I went to college, I got sent to college by the military, and I had been in for 10 years at this point, or I guess, 10 years. I'd been in for 10 years. I mean, I sat in the front row of every college class I had. I would literally get all hundreds on my tests, and I just would study and I would be prepared. So that's what, that came from being in the military and understanding how to apply myself and focus on things and wanting to win. A lot of times, when I went to college, I already was in the military. I didn't need to get good grades, but for me, it was just a competition against the teacher. I wanted to beat the teacher. I wanted to give them nothing that they could say anything about me other than you actually answered every single question right on this test. I've had fun with it. So yeah.
So do you have some like tips and tricks for absorbing information? Because I think we're bombarded with information, right? And there's people who are experts who know a little bit about everything, but I think that we're losing that time when people are true deep experts. Like somebody who I spent 10 years of my life studying birds, which may be super weird, but that was like my passion and that's what I did. And
it's weird. It's super weird.
But I think there's something to be said for, you've obviously been able to like open books and retain the information to the point where the teacher cannot call you out. Like what were the skills?
I'm probably a good test taker and probably good at memorization. Not great at it, but good at it. And so I would read the book, I would highlight, I would take notes, and I would turn those notes into flashcards. And then I would run through those flashcards. I mean, there's a book called Tom Jones. I got it here in my library. In the first paragraph, it says, this is a book about human nature. Or the theme of this book is human nature. And we had a quiz on the first section of reading. And there was, 7 questions about the characters and who they were and what happened to them in these first chapter or whatever. But the first question was, what is the theme of this book? And I missed it. And, I went to the professor after, I was like, what is the answer to this question? She said, oh, it's in the first paragraph. And I missed it. And I was really bummed out because I guess I just read it too quick. But I would get, in that semester with that professor, that's probably the only question that I actually missed. I was such a nerd, man. My trick is I would read. I did all the reading that I was assigned. I would highlight the important things, the things I thought that were important, and then I'd make flashcards out of those things that I had highlighted, and I'd study them. And that's what I did. I probably worked. There's no trick, man. The trick is that I worked hard. Yeah, that was the trick.
I love what you're saying. I love just the purity of working hard and what that does. But do you feel as obviously a very observant person, as a parent too, like what do you think like the youth of today, and obviously you can tell I'm a dad, I'm always thinking about that. I got 8 and a 10-year-old. It's all I'm ever worried about. What do you think their greatest struggles are? I mean, besides like, all the chaos of the United States and everything out there, but like just in general, like, do you think is it the phone? Is it like attention? Is it just like the lack of silence? Is it, because I think you've come full circle. You had that upbringing, full like kind of Dogtown Z-Boys style, like punk rock era, like expressed yourself, and then all of a sudden it was like whoosh, everything got sucked in to this like really focus, which is amazing. And now you're on the other side of it, and I'd love to know like what do you think that they're facing right now, like biggest challenges?
So you got 2 boys. People will talk to me about like young men and how they are now and what they're like, and they're soft and they're whatever. I just look at my son and his friends, and I'm like, okay, I'm not seeing that over on my side. So I think get your kids in the water, get them surfing, get them doing jiu-jitsu and wrestling, get them outside, get them lifting weights. I think they're going to be just fine. I meet the young guys coming in the SEAL teams, same thing. They're studs. They're beasts. I'm not worried about it. Yeah, you can turn anything into a problem. I mean, the fact that the big, tech companies are out there making these programs that are completely addictive, whether it's video games or social media, people have to recognize that those things are addictive and that they're set up to capture your brain and get your dopamine addiction going. And if you don't recognize that, it's going to be a problem. But if you recognize that and you can say, oh, dang, in my family right now, we got this little thing going where if you're looking at your phone, the rest of the family is going dopamine, dopamine, dopamine. It's really, really funny because everyone's right. We do it. We all are harassing each other. If someone's looking at their phone, the rest of the family is going dopamine, 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 and it's true. So you go, yeah, you're all right. You put your phone down. So, yeah, put your phone down. Don't get it. Don't watch out for the free dopamine. Right, the free dopamine comes from junk food. The free dopamine comes from your Instagram and social media and all that. So just get away from the free dopamine. Earn your dopamine with burpees and good waves.
Exactly.
I love it.
Did fatherhood come naturally to you? Was that something that was kind of ingrained in you from a young age, or because for me personally, I didn't grow up with a dad. I was terrified when I had kids. I was like, dude, what now? What do you do now? Just never had that nurturing thing. It was just me and my mom. And I feel in some way like I wrote a children's book a couple years ago. It was a really cool experience. It taught me a lot, but it was almost like a way for me to kind of deal with some of that, trying to articulate and materialize the lessons maybe I hadn't learned and put it into something. So I guess, I want to know a little bit more about that book and just kind of maybe that process. What was that like for you to create?
It's weird for me because I just have almost full books in my head. They're just all in there. They're ready to come out. And for me, writing is more like just manual labor. It's just I have to type the words that are in my head into a computer. That's what writing is for me. There's no, I'm not really thinking about anything. I'm not exploring any, patterns in my brain. The stories are in my head, almost fully formed, all of them. And I've got many of them in there. And so I just kind of write. And I wrote the books because as I was raising my kids, there wasn't any books that I actually liked to read to them or to give to them because they just didn't seem to have the values that I sort of wanted my kids to have, and so I just wrote my own.
Yeah. And it seems in some way the books that are out there, they don't deal with real practical application. You're dude, your kid's dealing with a bully at school, or your kid's dealing with this, and all of a sudden it's you can read about this pageantry of elves that goes to wherever, but where's the story of the real thing where they get the insight in how you could deal with this? And you can make up fantastical characters, but at the end of the day, this boy, this gal needs to stand up for themselves or make a choice or ask for help or be brave, and that's really hard to find. I totally agree with you. It's really a struggle as a parent.
Yeah, and even as I was writing the first Way the Warrior Kid of the series, even the first one, I was kind of oh, no one thought of this. I can't believe no one thought of this. It seemed so obvious, and I knew it was going to do great because no one thought of this idea. And even when I wrote Mikey and the Dragons, the same thing. I was I can't believe no one's written this. This is so obvious. And I mean, I guess they are kind of archetypical characters. So maybe I just did. Well, I mean, I guess obviously I just took sort of archetypical characters and put them into stories, but they seemed real obvious to me at the time. And I was super stoked on all those when I would share them with my friends, the first people I would share them with, and you could see that they're oh, this is just it's too good, and I would be super stoked. So,
but so the a lot of the pillars of those books, right? Do those are they informed by your time in the service, right? There's got to be some inspiration or influence there. How do you lean on this extensive background in the service to make a children's book?
It's the principles that help me as a human being, and I just put them into kids' language. And again, is there any, if you work hard, things are going to turn out better for you. If you know how to defend yourself, you probably won't have to. If you want to be smart, you have to study. If you want to do well in school, you have to do the work. If you want money, you have to get a job or create a business. Like, all these things are so obvious.
Yeah.
But you know that all these are based on real things. Like, it was my oldest daughter that came home one day when she was, I forget what age it was, but she came home and said, "I'm stupid." And I said, "What do you mean? What do you mean you're stupid?" She says, "Everyone else knows their times tables. I don't know them." And I said, "How much have you studied?" And she looked at me. She didn't even know what studying was. She thought she should just know her times tables. Yeah. And so that's, so I sat her down and said, "Okay, we're going to make flashcards." And I taught her how to make flashcards. And then she knew her times tables in an hour. And then the other story, or one of the other stories in there about swimming and being afraid of the water, that was actually based on my middle daughter, who wanted to be in the school play, but she was scared to sing in front of people. And so I said, "Okay, well, here's what we're going to do. You're going to sit in your room by yourself, and I'm going to shut the door, and you sing." And then the next day I said, "Okay, now I'm going to open the door and you're going to sing." And then the next day I said, "I'm going to stand in the hallway and you're going to sing with the door open." And the next day I said, "You're going to stand in the hall. I'm going to stand in your doorway and you're going to sing." And I just gave her, and I didn't know it, but that's a real form of therapy. And the form of therapy is called exposure therapy. And that's what you do when someone's scared of something. You don't overexpose them to it, because then they'll be horrified. What you do is you show them a little bit of it at a time, and eventually they figure out that, oh, this is okay. There's nothing to be afraid of.
I love it. I mean, it's so cool too that you didn't just take, obviously, like, Extreme Ownership is such a powerful book. I feel like it really applies to people who are maybe within mine and Charles' age, younger, but you didn't just take principles from that and, like, directly apply it. It's cool to see them come from, like, real life experience, from being a dad, from questions that come up. Sometimes I think it's that similar thought. You're like, how do I address this? And then you're sitting there toiling over it, and that's really rad that it kind of comes from, like, that ingrained, real, raw experience.
Yeah. The whole all those books are based on stuff I actually did with my own kids, so it's pretty cool.
And I have to imagine the children's books probably are well read by adults. I mean, there's so much to dig out of those.
Yeah.
Is that something you experience?
For sure. Not only that, I mean, I get so many letters from kids, and then I get letters from parents as well, and emails and messages. One of the coolest things that happened was I got this letter, and I actually ended up reading it on my podcast, because it was this letter about this guy. He was, 37 years old, and he was out of shape and overweight, and he was drinking every night, and he was doing poorly at his job, and his relationship with it wasn't good. And he goes, "And then I read your book." And then he said, "I started small. I started just waking up every morning, going for a walk. And then I stopped drinking beer, every night. And then I started working harder at my job and started paying attention to what I was doing. And it's been whatever it was." He's like, then I stopped drinking completely. And then I stopped eating sugar. And eventually now it's been, 11 months, and I've lost 37 pounds, and I got a promotion at work, and, my relationship is great. And then he says, "And the book that I read was Way of the Warrior Kid." And I was kind of stoked on that one. Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. Very cool.
I was just going to say, I mean, I feel like there's so many layers to you, like children's book author, like you've done the military thing. And I mean, you read your Wikipedia page and it's stacked. Does anything scare you?
Yeah, I mean, not really. I'm not really scared of much, and there's a lot to be scared of in this world right now. But yeah, there's nothing that really scares me in that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, maybe if you gave me a couple days, I could come up with something. And I think when you have kids, I would say one of the scariest things, if you have kids, there's things that can happen to your kids that is very hard to control. And I've seen, kids have horrible things happen to them. I mean, everything from, drug addiction to overdosing and, whatever other problems kids can get into. And I've been very lucky. My kids are fantastic. But that, I would say, when they were younger, they're all older now. My kids aren't really kids anymore, to be honest with you. But when they were younger, I would pay attention. I wasn't really scared of it, but I don't know. You got to be careful. The world can be a scary place if you're not careful, I guess.
Where do you draw strength from? And like, or is that something, I mean, that sounds like a weird question, but in some way, but like where, I know for me, if I'm going to give to other people, or I'm going to, be on a project and be managing all this stuff, and I've got to like, give, I kind of have to have my well full. Like I have to fill myself up, time at home, time with the family, blah, 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 doing whatever it is. I just love to where do you draw strength from? Like how, I think that there's a lot asked of you, right? Your time, everything, business, ventures, speaking, yada, yada, yada. So how do you draw strength for that stuff? Because I mean, even the best of us can get at times just like, we feel like we're just depleted, right? Giving so much of ourselves.
I don't know. I've not really thought too much about that. I mean, I get up and I go, I don't know. I'm going to go and do what I'm going to do. And I don't really think too much about where it comes from or anything like that. It's rewarding to be able to try and help people out as much as possible. And so I guess that's what I do.
But I think that's it though. Like, I mean, it seems like you're making these books, again, you have it's consulting, you're doing a podcast. All this is to ultimately kind of help other people, right? I mean, and so I'm guessing that that's a part of what fuels you, what gets you going, right? I mean, I know you get up, pre 5 o'clock, early as hell, workout, blah, blah, but like a part of you knows, and a very big part of you, that people are looking at that. They're taking ownership for their day because they see that and they're like, holy shit, like somebody's calling me out. I've got to do it too. And I mean, that feels good, right? Like, I mean, that's a part of that experience. I mean, I know if nobody was seeing it, you'd still be doing it, but that's gotta like in some way make you feel, okay, I'm gonna do one more rep. Okay, I'm gonna push this one more time because like somebody's doing it too. It's kind of, I don't know.
Well, yeah, like the podcast definitely feels like that because a lot of people will touch base with me about the podcast and how much it helps them and all that. So the podcast, and then the podcast is a high demand signal on me, right? Because it's something that needs to be done every week. So it's not like a book. I mean, someone tells me they learned a lot from leadership strategy and tactics. I'm like, hey, awesome. I'm glad you read it, but I don't have to work on it today.
Yeah.
But the podcast, it's like, I owe another one, as soon as I get done with one, I owe another one. So, knowing that people are out there and that it's helping them out is definitely keeps me working on them.
What does like the day-to-day look for you right now, besides obviously getting up early, working out, and then like is it like, you hear some of these people's schedules like, yeah, like from 4 to 5 I'm doing this, and then from 5 to 10 I'm hanging out with my kids, and then does it vary? I mean, because as Charles mentioned, your time probably just people are pouncing on you for stuff, and some things you're committed to. Obviously, you're not afraid of consistency. That's probably one of your strengths. But what does that look like? What does the day-to-day look like for you?
Every day is different, Every day is different. Other than the fact that I get up early and work out after that, who knows? I might be working with a client. I might be traveling to work with a client. I might be I might be checking formulas for new supplements. I might be, looking at the new design for a new pair of, hunting pants. It just, stuff changes all the time. Every day is a little bit different.
And are your new ventures always based around purely your interests, or is it more like, hey, I was in this space, I was using X, Y, and Z, and it sucked, and so now I'm here to make something better. I've always loved this idea that when we bring a product into the world, we're either solving a problem or answering a question. Like we're creating something because it needs to be created, not just because, oh God, I can turn a buck and I can, so I'd love to know, like, what's your approach there? Obviously started a multitude of business ventures and within health and wellness, but then also this latest thing, hunting, made in the USA. So yeah, what's the process look like for you?
Yeah, it is 100% based on things that I want, things that I need, things that I want the way I want them. That's why I start stuff. Because if there was something that already existed that was the way I thought it should be, that's what I would use, If it doesn't exist, then I'm going to figure out how to make it.
Is that fun for you? That process exciting and fun, like to kind of put something into the market? Is it kind of a pain in the ass, or is it something where you're like, oh, like you kind of get stoked on that, you know?
Both. It's a pain in the ass, but it's also awesome, you know. Right now at Origin USA, we have 5 factories. We've got hundreds of people that are working in America. And our whole supply chain is American workers making things. So is that hard to do? Yeah, there's a lot going on. Is it worth it when you see, you know, when I get to put on a garment, or I see someone wearing a pair of jeans or wearing a pair of boots that I know is 100% made in America by American hands? That's awesome. Supplements, like when I see someone drinking one of my energy drinks and I know that they've got something that's literally good for them instead of something that's literally horrible for them, that feels great. So yeah, the process is hard. Of course. I mean, everything's hard. The time investment, the capital investment, the management of the logistics of all these things is crazy. It's crazy. And the barrier to entry on some of this stuff is the barrier of entry. The way we're doing it is very high. Whereas there's an easy way to do this stuff too, which is not the right way to do it.
Right.
You know, like when I started my energy drink, I didn't want any chemicals in my energy drink. The only way to do that and make it sustainable on the shelf was to pasteurize it, which means it's like a heating process that you kill all the germs that are in there. No one was doing this. We had to wait an extra, just over 6 months to prepare to be able to do an energy drink this way. The easiest thing would have been like, oh, everyone else uses chemicals, cool, we'll use chemicals too and slap my name on it and be good, you know? Same with, like, we sweeten it with monk fruit. Why do we sweeten it with monk fruit? We could save, 4 cents a can if we just use this other artificial sweetener that everybody else uses. No, we're going to do it the right way. It's the same thing with making clothing. Making clothing is a really hard thing to do. Making fabric. I mean, we have looms. We weave fabric. It's very difficult things. It's craftsmanship that was almost lost in this country. And luckily, my business partner Pete, he got hold of some of the last people that knew how to do this stuff, and now we're passing it on to the next generation. So that is, you can't pick a harder way to get that done, but you also can't pick a more right way to do that stuff. So yeah, it is a pain in the ass, but things that are hard are things that are worthwhile, and I'd rather do it the right way and have something that I can actually be proud of than do it the wrong way and have to hold my head in shame when I know that we're reinforcing slave labor in third world countries.
I think our world is some of the conversations are getting narrower and narrower. People are less willing to hear different opinions and to accept and consider different points of views, different experiences and backgrounds. You've interviewed hundreds of people. You've, I'm sure, educated and taught, interacted with so many different types of people, from the people in the service, working with Iraqi soldiers, teaching different SEALs, interviewing people on your podcast. How do you find common ground, and what are some of the lessons and tactics or things that you've come away with having just exposed yourself to so many different types of thinking and living and being?
Yeah. You really do have to. I think this sort of stemmed from me from a leadership perspective. As a leader, the more and more experienced I got as a leader, the more I realized that the more open my mind was, the better a leader I was going to be. So if someone comes to me and if Chris comes to me and he says, hey, I think we should do this mission like this, I realize that me saying, well, no, I think we should do it this way is bad. And the best thing I could do is open my mind and listen to what Chris has to say, because Chris probably has a reason why he's saying this, and he probably sees something that I don't see. And so I'm just going to listen to what he has to say. And by the way, if I don't agree with it, initially, I'm going to say, well, he must understand something that I don't understand. How can I ask him some questions so that I better understand his perspective, so that if his perspective is correct, we can go with his plan instead of my plan. So I think initially this sort of attitude that I have of trying to keep an open mind just came from, as a leader, having to interact with people. And then over time, I realized, that if there's someone that has a viewpoint that I don't necessarily out of the gate agree with, I shouldn't pounce on them and think, oh, you just don't understand. No, instead I think there might be something I don't understand. And so then ask them earnest questions about what their viewpoint is and try and see their side of things and understand that their perspective is going to be different than mine. And that's okay. So for me, that's kind of what it boils down to. I think I often say the most underrated and underutilized skill of leadership is listening. And this traditional sense that everyone thinks if you're in a leadership position, that means you're standing up and you're barking orders at everyone. Like, no, that's not true at all. The best leaders will listen to what everyone has to say. The best leaders, the second tool of leadership is asking earnest questions. Like, hey, can you explain to me why you think that way? Or can you help explain this to me? Because I'm not sure I understand it. So that's what I do when I interact with other human beings, is I try and understand their perspective, try and see where they're coming from, definitely look for common ground. Unless someone is a ISIS member or a Nazi, then there's going to be somewhere where I say, oh, I understand where you're coming from. If someone's, a Republican or a Democrat, there's going to be something that I go, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. I want people to be able to earn a living. So do you. Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's start with that. So I just try and keep an open mind and listen to what people have to say and try and understand other people's perspectives.
Dude, that's it right there. That was beautiful. Sorry,
I should play that twice.
I know. Like, hey, everybody, we're gonna slow this down. I mean, it really though. It's about building bridges, not walls. I mean, that's the mindset that I think the world needs more of. And if we're constantly shouting into the echo chamber, all we're gonna hear back is our own voice, right? So I love what you said about that. I mean, that truly is like the sign, I think, of a great leader, and just sage wisdom, man. That's amazing.
And how do you balance, this is my last question, I have to ask it, intuition with a reverence for process?
Yeah. Well, they both are part of the calculus, right? And there has to be the answer to your question is in your question, and that has to be balanced. I can look at spreadsheets about a decision that we're going to make from a business perspective, and the numbers might say to do one thing, but if I've got a gut instinct that's saying to do something else, I can't ignore it. And the same thing, I can't have a gut instinct that this is what I think we should do and ignore the numbers. I have to take both those and put those both into the calculus to make a decision. And then generally what I do is something that I call the iterative decision-making process. I don't make big, giant decisions all at one time. I make small decisions a little bit at a time, and I pay attention to the feedback, and I'm humble enough to realize that, hey, the decision that I made could very well be wrong, and so I need to make adjustments. So I don't ever count out my intuition and my gut. I don't ever count out the data and the metrics that I see. I'm gonna put those both in the calculus of my decision-making process and weigh them both appropriately. I'm also going to understand my own bias about things. Like some people, you might have a bias where you really look at the metrics. And if that's where you normally lean, you need to say to yourself, you know what? I always rely too much on the numbers. I need to keep that in check. So we kind of need to profile ourselves and understand our own psychological profile so that we can account for that in the calculus as well.
Yeah. Takes deep reflection to do that. It's hard for a lot of us to look at where we potentially could be more reflective, more introspective, and sometimes take a step backwards to take a step forwards.
Yep.
Tough.
Well, I recommend you go surfing to go try and figure some of that stuff out.
Yeah.
Hey, Jocko, thank you so much. I mean, I especially the last two questions, I feel like I just had a full, dissertation read to me about how to do life well. So cheers and so much gratitude.
Yeah, man.
Right on.
Means a lot, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, fellas.
That conversation was awesome. It's interesting to chat with somebody who is so intense but has so much vulnerability. But he's so motivated, and it leaves me feeling I left that conversation feeling stoked. I'm like, oh, I want to go surf. I want to go hit it. I want to go do 100 push-ups or something like that. And it's funny because he kind of lives his life in that ownership mentality always, right. He's holding himself accountable, but by holding himself accountable, he's holding us accountable, which is rad.
Well, I think one of the themes is there's no point in taking shortcuts, right? You listen to somebody with a different point of view because there's a benefit to it. You come out better, stronger, wiser, more well-rounded, more balanced. You wake up early because you have all these benefits. You get to be up before the world's busy. You get to be up before the sun, seize the day. And so I think there's a lot of things that come off as maybe simple, right? How to teach your kid to not be fearful of being on stage. But really, he's just saying, it's the process. Right. If you honor the process of being strong, of waking up early, of being wise, successful, like you said, of course there's intuition, but there's just a process. And totally. If you want to get dopamine, do the work, do the burpee, go surfing, Yeah,
exactly. It's pretty rad. It's pretty rad. When you asked him that question about do you fear anything? And he was legitimately was like, no, I don't. I was like, you know what? He's doesn't. He's the first person who I've ever heard answer that question that I 100,000% believe.
Really excited for the wisdom of Jocko to percolate into your brain and just sit with it for a little bit, because I think we'll all come out the other side better people.
And with that being said, I think we should just get up and go.